Craig Counsell poignant about the Cubs going into the trade deadline. We're going to talk about that. Is that the signal that the Cubs are going to sell? Well, it feels like that. After another loss to the Diamondbacks, they'll head into today's game trying to avoid a sweep. Arizona has owned the Cubs over the last couple of seasons. And if the Cubs had any hope of avoiding a sell-off, it really feels like losing the first two games after the All-Star break have certainly dwindled those down. We're going to talk about that, maybe some of the players that could be leaving and what that means for the organization. The Cubs also made some signings. Yeah, they signed 10 of the 20 that they drafted, and that's good, including their first-round pick, Cam Smith. So we'll get into that as well right here on the Cubs Baseball channel. Make sure that you guys like and subscribe. Give us a thumbs up, man. We're so glad that you're here hanging out, talking Cubs baseball. Let's get this thing started with a big Go Cubs. What do you say, everybody? Welcome to the Cubs Baseball channel. I'm Mick Gillespie at Broadcaster Mick on the socials. And I want to remind you that we are available at Twitter, at Instagram, and at TikTok right now. Cubs Baseball channel, everywhere that you could find the Cubs Baseball channel. And we appreciate all of you hanging out with us, whether it's on YouTube or maybe you found us from one of those destinations. But a lot to talk about. I know it hasn't been the season that many of us thought that it could possibly be. But here we are going into the trade deadline, looking to make some deals and possibly trade away some players. And Craig Counsell said this. I thought he was very poignant about the Cubs and their odds. And when you hear the manager say stuff, like this, it's a far gone conclusion that, it's time to punt and start thinking about next year, right? I look at the total number of games we have left to prove ourselves. That's our job. The way we played the first 100-ish games of the season has not left us very much room for error. We really have to play really well to get back in this and put ourselves into position, right? I don't think that it's determined by the next 10 days. Okay. So the way I'm reading that is we have to play really well. And then that the trade deadline is coming up at the end of the month, right? So maybe as manager, you're never going to say, hey, man, I'm waving the white flag, right? But at the same time, saying that the way we played the first 100-ish games has not left us very much room for error, right? And then talking about the next 10 days, hey, the bottom line is this, that this team constructed right now, and he knows this, is not going to win a World Series. It's just not. You look at the contending teams and what they bring to the table, and you compare that roster to what the Cubs bring to the table, and it just doesn't match. Teams that win a World Series have star players at a lot of positions. They just do. Or they have a huge strength, like when the Giants won the World Series, they weren't really a great hitting team, but they had the best catcher in the game. They had timely hitting, and then they had great starting pitching and an awesome bullpen. I remember Kansas City when they won in the year before the Cubs, 2015. They just had like a back-end bullpen that as long as they had the lead, they were going to win, right? Some teams overpower you. They do enough with the offense to keep themselves close. And then maybe beat you late. When I look at the Cubs, I'm trying to figure out what this team does well besides starting pitching. And the starting pitching's been really good. Even Kyle Hendricks yesterday, I didn't think he had a bad outing at all, but he got absolutely zero run support. And the problem with this Cubs team is that no matter how good the starting pitching is, when you don't score runs, and they never score runs against the good pitchers, that to me is the barometer, right, of a good team. When you're up against the best in the league, what are you doing? And what the Cubs are doing is not scoring runs. And then you can say, well, Cody Bellinger's not there. so-and-so's hurt. It's been like that when they had the entire lineup since, the end of April. They've just been one of the worst offenses against the good pitchers in the league. So what does that leave us with? I think that it goes back again to what the Cubs are willing to trade away. And I keep wondering, okay, do you make deals with other contenders where maybe you don't necessarily trade away your prospects, but you trade people off your big league roster for people off their big league roster? I feel like that used to happen a lot in baseball, and maybe it doesn't happen as much anymore. It feels like most of the trades are, hey, you're getting minor leaguers, and we're going to get big league players, right? But maybe you do one of those deals. The Blue Jays, we talked about it, Vlad Guerrero Jr. I mean, how cool would it be to have him there? Could they possibly do something with the Rays? Did a video on that yesterday, or maybe some other teams out there that are kind of like, in that mix of teams that are kind of in it. They don't want to really give up on their roster. They think that the team has a chance. I don't know. Or do you go full sell and say, hey man, Cody Bellinger's available. His broken finger is going to heal up. You know that he'll be back soon. Nico Horner, you've heard his name because teams would really like to get Nico. He's under control. He's a Gold Glover. He's been a really solid player for the Cubs. He's been super reliable. Maybe somebody would take a chance on Christopher Morel, but I think that his stock has dropped a lot this year compared to what it would have been had they traded him before the season. And we're finding out that playing third base every day he's not as bad as he was. He improved some, but at the same time, the bat hasn't really been that good. Maybe you move him. Jamison Tyone would be one. You trade him, you get rid of that money that he's owed. And he's had a very, very good year. And you keep Imanaga and you keep Steele. You're not going to have Hendricks next year, so that's $16.5 million that you're going to have. What do you have in the system to jump up and replace it? I mean, look, you're going to trade players away on a team that's kind of teetering under 500. They're going to get worse, but maybe you get an opportunity to see what you got in the farm system, and maybe you find another Javier Assad type guy where you're like, hey, maybe we didn't really think that this guy was going to do that well, but he's come to the big leagues and he's figured it out, right? Those are the questions that I think that the Cubs have to look themselves in the mirror. Is Ian Happ willing to give up his no trade clause and go somewhere else? I mean, he's been the one guy on the team who, when he's performed, has led the Cubs to wins, right? I think catcher is a position that the Cubs got to do something about. Not comfortable with that spot at all. You're stuck with Dansby Swanson. He has been an enormous letdown this year. He just does not do anything at the plate to help you win. And maybe it's just one of those years, who knows? Maybe he bounces back next year. But if this is a regression, the Cubs are in a lot of trouble because there's a chance that he's Jason Hayward 2.0. Because you got him for, another 5 years after this. So if this is a regression and not just, hey, he's the guy's been playing with a nagging knee, then you're in big trouble, right? Morel at third base, talked about that in a video yesterday. Not sold on him. Would love to see Pete Crow Armstrong continue to get better. Look, he hasn't had the year Michael Busch has had. Quietly, Michael Busch has done well, but he's shown you flashes of what he can do. And, and then you talk about some of the guys in the minor leagues that I'm sure we'll see sooner than later, like an Owen Casey. So that's where we're at right now. As some of the trade talks start to heat up, we'll see what happens. There's not a lot of sellers right now. So the Cubs would be one of those teams that I think would have a lot of interest from other teams just because there aren't a whole lot of teams that are out of it. And there may be even some teams that have a similar record that say they're still in it. I just feel like for me and where this organization is, the best move would be figure out what you can get for some of these guys and then start, not a rebuild. They never did rebuild, but to just move in a direction where you get younger and you take advantage of having one of the top farm systems. Talking about farm systems, Cubs have signed, and I'll throw this up on the screen off of Cubs.com, but they have signed their first round pick. And they have signed 10 different players. They got Cam Smith with a signing bonus at $5.7 million. So they got him right at the slot value, right? He's the third baseman out of Florida State, so that's exciting. You get your first-round pick signed. They also signed their second-round pick, Cole Mathis, out of the College of Charleston. So good for them there, right at slot level as well. They signed their fourth-round pick, the really fun shortstop out of Nevada, Ty Salsini. They also signed their seventh-round pick. They signed their 11th round pick as well. So starting to get those guys signed. And this is a really important part of the draft. I mean, it's not just going and, and drafting guys. It's also getting those guys signed, right? So, you get your first round pick, you get your second round pick, you get your third round pick, you get your fifth round pick, you get your sixth round pick, seventh round pick, eighth round pick, ninth and 10th. So that's really good. And everyone's super excited about Smith. You talk about making a great intro. The fact that the guy said his grandmother was a Cubs fan, and then, he also almost hit 400 in the ACC at Florida State this year. He was a sophomore, but a draft eligible sophomore. The guy had a ton of extra base hits, 22 doubles, a triple, 16 home runs, and was one of the best players on a team that went to the College World Series. So we'll continue to watch that, but good news for the Cubs as they land those picks. All right, final thing today, wrap up this series with the Diamondbacks. Same result that we saw with these guys last year. The Cubs are going to throw out their best player, their all-star, Shota Imanaga, Wrigley Field 120. Imanaga 8-2 with a 2.97 ERA. Brandon Pfaadt going to counter. This guy had an awful season last year, except against the Cubs, right? And then he got hot in the postseason. But 4-6, 3.97 ERA. He's a super talented guy, and we'll see what happens. Cubs need to win this game to avoid a sweep. Should be a pretty good crowd at Wrigley Field. And we'll talk to you guys sometime soon. We got on there, starting to talk about these injuries. Luke Little, they're saying he's going to be lost for the year. They're saying that Hayden Wesneski, not as concerned, although he's going on the IL. Hunter Biggie came back. He looked pretty good in his outing return after going back to Iowa. And we could see a lot of Hunter Biggie's teammates on this big league team sometime really, really soon. So anyway, thanks guys. And again, comment section, do that. Make sure that you subscribe, and we're hitting another milestone on the channel, and appreciate all of you guys for joining and hanging out with us to talk Cubs baseball every day. We'll do it again tomorrow. See you.